All right, we're good. So, Dr. Brager, what do we need to know about having the best sleep environment that we can have, even though a lot of people have a busy schedule, they have a lot on their mind, maybe they have family, kids, and jobs. What strategies have you seen and you researched in the field which can help people?
I think it comes down to three things, no matter where you are. It's as simple as keeping it cool, dark, and quiet. Cool because we want to get our body temperature down to its lowest level. Um, Dark, obviously, we don't want to disrupt the release of melatonin. And then sure, quiet is person dependent, but the point here is, right, we don't want to be sleeping in a place where we're going to be prone to lots of awakenings because of ambulances driving down the street or any other background noise that is going to disrupt us and jolt us out of our sleep.
Do you think that something like a white noise machine or pink noise machine would that be helpful if otherwise it couldn't be quiet in your room, or are those more disruptive, or what have you seen in your research with that?
No, those are actually really good. So oftentimes when we're sending folks downrange, they have a little sleep kit now that they'll bring with them, and there is one of the sleep kits that has one of those portable machines because it is able to block out those noises, especially if you're sleeping in a hotel room. I can't tell you how many times when I've traveled for work and right there's just inconsiderate people on your floor who are slamming doors. If you have the right one and the right sound frequency, it'll block out the door slams.
Do you know if there's like a specific frequency that works the best? Like I've seen like, pictures on Instagram of like, oh, white noise, brown noise, pink noise. And I feel like they all sound similar, but the frequency is different.
Yeah, I know the Army, years and years ago, there was some defense funded study for pink noise. Pink noise is essentially like calmer, smoother, less jarring of a sound compared to white noise. And it did show that it could further consolidate sleep. But whether or not like it's the pink noise per se, or it's just the point of having like some auditory noise that is preventing right midnight awakenings is TBD. I think just like with everything else, it's not a one size fits all.
No, it's a
Even if people, right, the people in the human performance community will try to tell you and sell you on the idea that theirs is the best.
yeah, there's no shortage of people out there trying to sell you like the best thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think that I'm interested to see what you would think about this with respect to sleep and then focus. And obviously, we'll get into some, circadian rhythm biology. Do you think that if someone were to listen to brown noise or pink noise or white noise, they could become accustomed to that and say, like, okay, now it's time to sleep? Should they not listen to that when they're focusing, working, studying? Should they maybe listen to something else to block out noise, maybe like ocean sounds or the sounds of a stream? Or is that not a type of conditioning which we would really focus on too
That's a
much?
good point. Actually, I'm sure there is a conditioning effect with that, right? I teach freshman level psychology to cadets here at West Point. All right, we just talked about classical conditioning. Like that could easily be a form of classical conditioning. I didn't even think of that. So, but that is true. Some people might use that when they're trying to. I don't know why you would use that when you're trying to work, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I like my rap and house music too much.
You can listen to house music and rap music while you're focusing.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's because so growing up as a gymnast, and we always had music on when we were training. Like, so I did gymnastics since the age of 2. Obviously, I didn't form a memory then, but um, I think that's why I'm able to focus. Honestly, I can focus through any noise in the background because of gymnastics. That's I think one gift of the sport. You're so dialed in when, especially you're doing like your balance beam routine, that you're just not or any event really, you're not going to pay attention to what's going on in the background. You more or less have tunnel vision.
Well, have you ever heard of the cocktail party effect?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that I will say I am like prone to that though.
I think most people are, right? Like if
Yeah.
you just, it's like people just talking at a coffee shop or at a party, and it's just like little conversations here and there, and then you hear Allison. It's like, what? It's like, did someone say my name? And that's the way that I feel with like music with lyrics, or even if I listen to a soundtrack, I can't listen to a soundtrack while I'm studying or trying to focus because I start humming the words, and I feel like that's the cocktail party effect. So I have to do
Oh
ocean
yeah.
sounds. Like even if it's like a, I don't know, like some soundtrack, and I'm like, ha ha ha, and it's like I can't focus on it.
Yeah. No, that is true. I mean, I'm sure we all have like reasons for why that is too. There's something maybe about like whatever sports you played or whatever you did as a kid that like put you in that state.
So you had said with like creating the optimal sleep environment, like we have the sounds, we don't want to be disrupted throughout our sleep stages. With respect to staying cool, part of going to sleep is that we need to vasodilate. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. Because well, let's see, if you're cooling down though, no, it'd be vasoconstrict, right? Because if you're cooling down, you're going to vasoconstrict. If you're warming up, you're going to vasodilate. But I don't know. You're more of an expert in like physiology than I am. I just focus on the physiology of this and nothing
So
else.
you're more focused on like the pineal gland specifically and like melatonin
Yeah.
production, right? So yeah, no, like what we did with like a lot of our research previously, like when I was in school, was on like sleep onset, sleep latency,
Mhm.
and how we get like the best sleep possible. But I think I wanted to go to you as like the expert on this as far as like the stages of sleep. So like let's say like as we're falling to sleep, if we have a very fast sleep onset, we're able to fall asleep quickly, and blood pressure drops, we're able to dilate, we're able to relax. We want to have a cooler environment because I guess we want to like cuddle up to like a blanket or something and feel cozy, feel safe, as opposed to feeling hot and you start sweating. Is there an optimal temperature, or is there even like a tipping point at which it's too cold or too hot, or is that a little bit too specific?
No, I mean, I think specificity is good, and also specificity is person dependent. So that's, I mean, that's part of the reason why there are those like cooling mattresses and pads now, and they're inter individualized based on who you are. Um, but the idea is exactly what you said. Like you want to ramp down your temperature, either artificially, but really like you're trying to get down your core body temperature because the lower your core body temperature, the greater the propensity to be in the restorative stages of sleep.
And can there be any disruption? Because we had talked about this a little bit before we started recording about you could sleep 7 to 9 hours, which is the quote unquote scientifically backed amount, but then some folks might only get 3 or 4 hours and then later in the day do naps. And you talked about a lot of your work with Antarctica. Is there
Mhm.
any issues with that as far as like going through a whole sleep cycle with like NREM sleep and then REM sleep? Because I think it's like N1, N2, N3 followed by REM. It could be 60 to 90 minutes. Is there any fragmentation there if you're jolted awake, or is it better just to go through as many full cycles as you can?
Yeah, so the more full cycles, the better. I think younger kids are more resilient and that, right? They wake up in the middle of the night, they're going to fall back asleep. Someone like me who's early 40s, like, don't stand a chance because we know sleep disruptions as you age become more pervasive um, and are more lingering. Um, but the idea is, right, you want to max out your restorative sleep for as long as possible. And if you have those constant disruptions, well, it's not like you start right back at that stage of sleep, right? You have to restart the cycle and start slowing down your brain waves from gamma to beta to alpha to delta in order to get there.
Is there a reason why people jolt out of that very, very light sleep more easily than the deep sleep?
So in light sleep, it's going to happen because the when you talk about like the EEG brainwaves, um, at that stage they're in like alpha state, theta state, which isn't too far off with sometimes you see with wakefulness, right? Like someone who is like in a very intensely focused, energized state is going to have more of those beta gamma, right, fast waves. Someone who's right in a meditative state or in a relaxed state is going to have alpha. So there's very little differences between sleep and wake in that regard. And that's part of the reasons why one of the prevailing models of sleep is the flip flop model, where there's brain areas in the hypothalamus and then the forebrain that are it's just like a light switch, just flip flopping back and forth between wake and sleep, at least when we're talking about light sleep.
Can you speak a little bit more about that and maybe like how people can do that? Is it more of just like getting into a rhythm of getting relaxed before you go to bed, optimizing your sleep? What do they call it? Like there's like sleep architecture, but also just like, showering, brushing your teeth, having a specific pattern before you fall asleep. It's just kind of conditioning yourself to be like, okay, now I'm going to switch it off and I'm going to get ready to go to bed.
Yeah, I mean, sleep routine is important, right? We were talking about this earlier. It's dependent on what you consider relaxing, but like it's hard to get your brain to go from this high state. And it's not just about the brain activity, it's the adrenaline, the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. It's all those factors. You have to be able to redirect them and like slowly wind them down. Um, because they're not going to wind down quickly under most normal circumstances, right? The only time we ever see, right, where they have this abrupt wind down is after intense trauma, but usually that trauma is preceded by sleep deprivation, like high physical strain, cognitive stress. But even then, like that's usually not a suitable way to wind down. Um, but right, 30 to 60 minutes is definitely the sweet spot.
And is there, I guess, all of that can get disrupted if your schedule is discontinuous, if maybe you're getting in too much blue light, and if you're staying too stimulated, if you have caffeine too late in the day, maybe if you're exercising at a in a regular time relative to where you would typically exercise.
Yeah. So the body keeps score of all those time cues. It's not just the lifestyle things like when you're stopping caffeine, but stress is a huge one. And if you have stress leading up to your moment in bed and you don't have time to properly process that stress, then good luck falling asleep, especially when you're, in your 40s and beyond.
You keep saying in your 40s. Is there an inflection point with like having more efficient sleep and then having less efficient sleep? Because I know like
Mhm.
older folks, maybe like considered old in research terms, might be like, I don't know, 55 and up or 60 and up. But are you still seeing that before within your research that people maybe after 30 or 40 do have issues with their sleep efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, most of the populations we've studied, right, in the military they are confounded by the fact that most of them are veterans, and right have deployments and other military constraints on top of that. But I think that's just what's been shown with all the wearable data, right, from companies, whether it's Garmin, Whoop, Aura, is it seems around like 35, 36, right? That's when our hormones, especially like those anabolic hormones, growth hormone, testosterone, even things, right, such as estrogen and progesterone. Menopause, for example, is like a single day in a woman's life. Like the state of being perimenopausal can be as long as like 10, 15 years. Usually around 35, that's where we see these more nuanced changes, and where they're affecting sleep is not so much like the timing of sleep like you see in elderly individuals. It's more the efficiency. But if you don't have good sleep efficiency, then you're going to have poor next day performance. So um, and then it's sort of this vicious cycle, if you will, and that with poor sleep efficiency you're more likely to be disrupted by these environmental factors or like psychological factors. um, you know, aging is not a fun process. I feel like every year it becomes more and more of a challenge, especially if you're still competitive in athletics.
So I guess that would put like a whole lot more respect for the athletes who are able to play into their 30s and 40s.
Oh God, yeah, I know. I mean, love him or hate him, like I think what Aaron Rodgers does is impressive. Like the fact one, he could recover from what would be a life-ending industry injury. I wouldn't even say career ending, but like life-ending injury, in terms of like movement and mobility and athleticism, is impressive. And I mean, he's, I don't know, how old is he? I think we're like the same age. He's like 41 or
I think
42.
he's 41. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we're same age, and it's like I don't know how he does it. It's, you know.
Well, you have a PhD,
Oh, Brady too. Brady
and
too. Right? Yeah.
yeah, and you've done very well in the military. But you know, I think it's interesting to say with like someone like Aaron Rodgers too. It's like, and I would ask you this question because I come from like the nutritional end of things, and you're
Right.
very ingrained in sleep. How much do you think with his approach as well could be like that psychological, you know, aspect of like relaxation and belief and mindset? Because some people do have that, you know, fixed belief system or limited belief system, whereas he's all about like the holistic medicine, yada yada yada. It's like there might be some scientific backing to that, maybe there's not, but how much do you think that plays into him just like staying relaxed, staying calm, keeping parasympathetic tone up and saying, no, I'm going to get back?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to it. You know, that's the part of the problem I have sometimes with um, sports medicine in particular. Like they're too westernized, and like, you know, I've mentioned acupuncture and meditation, breathwork stuff to, you know, sports med docs, and they just roll their eyes. And but I think the more, right, these Eastern medicine practices get integrated into a generally westernized medical culture, um, right, the more that I think sports meds and especially ortho surgeons will be willing to adopt. I mean, we see the same thing in the military too. I'm not going to lie, right? They want
What
to
are some like
they
examples?
want to cut into you first and keep you off the line for um, so many weeks. And when we can take a more holistic approach, and keep you like sustaining. But, you know,
Do you think that's been a big goal of what you would have liked that you've been doing throughout the course of your career? Because like, and this is just an example, you can roll your eyes, you have whatever, you know, opinion you would like to have, but like, you know, someone like David Goggins got very popular in the past 5, 6, 7,
Mhm.
8 years, and he got popular off of like just work hard. Like that's his tagline is just work harder. And it's like, okay, there's merit to that, but then there's also like a merit to like you can get yourself sick and injured and drive yourself into the ground. Do you think that you take it upon yourself to take more of that scientific approach, even like the hard data and the holistic approach of saying like, hey, we can still optimize and be the best that we have to be, but we can do it in a much smarter way. We don't just have to scream through it.
Yep. No, that's it's funny because he comes from a community where the second rule of special operations is quality over quantity. I feel like his philosophy is the exact opposite, but I mean, that's the approach I would say within the medical scientific community we take, particularly within like the more elite communities of the military. One, we do have the resources to do it, but it's less about resources and more about mindset. We're willing to acknowledge that people got to like this stage of their career and got through selection and met the standard in their own unique way. It wasn't the same training plan, nutritional plan, um, and so we have to take the same approach when we're trying to like preserve their longevity, um, in the long run.
And it's interesting, like on that sort of, you know, wavelength, like you have a lot of athletes too. And it's like I've coached a lot of Division 1 athletes just like in my spare time and some of my clients. And it's like a lot of them are Division 1 athletes, which is an amazing feat, something that a lot of people won't be able to do. And some of them want to go out for a draft in a couple of years, and they eat just these really poor diets, like a lot of fast food, and they're like, hey, it's fuel in the tank. I'm dunking over people, or I'm, you know, throwing a 90 mile per hour fastball, or I'm doing a bicycle kick in soccer. And for me, I'm like, okay, like that got you there, which is amazing. But what's going to distinguish you from all the other D1 athletes to get up to being a pro? And as we were talking about before with Tua Tagovailoa, whatever his name is, how do you get into the pros and then stay there like Brady or Aaron Rodgers did for 20 years. And I'm like, can we shift away from the junk food and get in more nutrient dense options? And that's where I come into play. So I'm interested to see what like you think about that with respect to military and sleep.
No, I think it's all the same. It's all, whether it's nutrition, sleep, um, strength and conditioning approaches, or even cognitive sports performance approaches. Is it's all about the input. And as you age, you have to, there's less room for error. Like the input has to be more and more precise. And you're right, Brady, Rogers, even Brett Favre, I would say, are like living legends of that, um, where they took care of their bodies. And perhaps I mean, I don't know anything about like Rogers or like Brady's history prior to, right, what we know today, but I'm sure they had that epiphany too, where they realized they had to eat better, sleep more, yada yada yada. LeBron James too. He's another one. I mean, he's up there as well.
I have a LeBron on almost every one of my PowerPoints when I teach nutrition. And I
Yeah.
do like a very sports nutrition focus. On one slide, I'll have like Serena Williams because she's the GOAT. She stayed in there for a long, long time. I have LeBron on there. I'll have Brady on there. I'm like, what have they done with their epigenetics, with their nutrigenomics, that they're maximizing their genetics moving forwards? And it's like they eat healthy. LeBron spends about $1 million per year on recovery and getting a personal trainer and all this other stuff. I'm like, hey, good for them. It's that's the way that they get paid. That's the way that they give back, so to speak, is by doing that. So how do you optimize that?
Yeah. I mean, and I think, it's interesting to bring up epigenetics with LeBron. So, I guess fun news story. I grew up in like the same area as LeBron. I grew up right outside of Akron in Youngstown, Ohio. Actually, my high school, Youngstown Boardman used to play St. Vincent, St. Mary's, where he went. Um, we're the same age, graduated high school the same year. Right. LeBron grew up on welfare, right? He was the parent of or he was the child of a single mom who raised him on the streets in Akron. And um, right, you talk about nutritional, nutrient dense food. Like he didn't have that. And he now, like, that's, he acknowledges nutrition as the reason what separates him and continues to separate him, in addition to the hard work from his competitors. And I just, right, what you put in your body is medicine. And I think LeBron is a perfect example of that. Because I don't think he would have been in the league as long if he continued to eat like the scarcity of food that was available to him as a child.
It's funny, they're now saying that to Anthony Edwards. That Anthony Edwards, like, he just like eats like pizza all the time, but he's young. He's like 22, 23, 24. He's like, yeah, it's fine. I'll eat pizza and I'll dunk over people. And his coaches are like, hey, relax with the pizza, man. Like, age is going to catch up at one point.
It does, yeah. I never really had that with nutrition, but I think that's because my parents are Mediterranean immigrants and my dad was a butcher. So, like, I always had, farm to table food. And I think I took that for granted growing up. Um, like, we, grew up like lower middle class, but I think just having that ability to like have my dad bring home fresh meat every night that they didn't sell at the butcher shop, really probably helped me develop as an athlete more than I realized.
So they quite literally, like, you followed like more of a Mediterranean diet, so to speak, of like whole foods, nuts, seeds, fruits, veggies, lean meats, and things like
Yep.
that.
Yeah, I still do. I mean, when I was competing in the CrossFit Games, like the early years, I, did the whole stupid paleo diet, which like we all laugh about now. We're like, what was wrong with us? I mean, yeah, we were always like tired, right? That it was just, I warm up, I was tired. I'd like be halfway through a workout, I couldn't see straight. I was tired. I was always tired, and of course, I didn't have any carbs in my body. Like the original paleo diet of CrossFit was just flat out stupid, in my opinion.
Well, no, it's funny now because I'm a part of the ultra marathon community.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love like the 50 milers, 100 milers. And like, it's funny because a lot of people coming up will use a lot of these, like, very popular terms like, oh, metabolic flexibility and fat adapted. And I'm like, well, if you understand like how the respiratory exchange ratio works and glycolysis versus like beta oxidation. When you're competing, like, you're burning off carbohydrates. You're not necessarily burning off fats. You can be
Yeah.
flexible back and forth, but a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to run 100 miles, so I'm only going to eat fat. I'm like, if you're running and your heart rate's 130, 140, 150, you're going to bonk if you're only eating fats. Like, you can't do that.
Can't do that. Yeah. Yeah, and I think like in CrossFit, you could get away with it, right? Because like the longest workout, especially in a competition, was like what, 12, 15 minutes. But the sustained stuff would just kill you. I actually did try. I don't, you can roll your eyes at me. I would be curious on the truthfulness of this is when I did so I've done one ultra, I've done one marathon and one ultra in my life, and I did the JFK 50.
Okay.
And I I did the Snickers and Gatorade diet that, or not diet, fueling strategy that Matt Frazier was talking about that he did with the group at University of Colorado Boulder. How much truth is to that? Because like honestly, I was fine the whole time, and it was incredibly cold and windy, and it was like I don't know if you've done the JFK 50 or know someone who has, but like it is a brutal course.
Yeah, I've trained a couple of my friends who've run it before, and I've run some pretty tough courses, but I've heard it's a great one, but I heard it's also getting very, very packed with people.
It
And it, like,
is,
that's what
yeah.
David Goggins said when he ran it a couple of years ago. He was like, it wasn't fun because there was just too many people. So I always find like the dollar per mile ultras that no one knows about. I'm like, cool, there were six of us, and I came in second or first out of six.
Yeah, I can understand that. It was, I will say, on the AT, it was like it's a single lane path and it's late November, so there's leaves everywhere. With that many people, like there were so many people falling. I mean, I worked at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center in school, so we had like a big team, but like, I mean, we were part of the legacy of why it was called the JFK 50. So I totally agree with you that, yeah, for those circumstances, it's better to stick with the grassroots ones.
Well, it's interesting with the you said Gatorade and Snickers.
Hmm.
Snickers, if I'm not incorrect, I think it's considered a low glycemic index food, which is crazy
Hmm.
to think about because the amount of
Wow.
sugar, but the amount of
Yeah.
fat between the nougat and the peanuts make it a low glycemic index food. So you can fuel pretty well off a low glycemic index food, despite the fact there's no protein, there's no fiber, there's no micronutrients. And
Yeah.
Gatorade it's not the best for electrolytes. Like, there's a lot of sugar, but if you're constantly moving for 50 miles and you're not just like la di da walking in the park, then it works. And like,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of successful ultras where I did Gatorade Zero and Twizzlers, and I've run some of
Yep.
my fastest 50 milers off Gatorade and Twizzlers because I was a grad student and I was broke. So I would literally just buy Gatorade Zero, like those big jugs, and then like those pull apart Twizzlers, which are like,
Yep.
in the whole pack you might get 5 to 8,000 calories, and I would just put in my pack and I'd be like, all right, we'll see you guys in 10 hours, and it worked. And then other times I
Yeah.
would throw it all up. So if you can handle it, then
That's funny you say that. I actually, when I dive, I crave Twizzlers like immediately after I'm done diving. I don't know what it is about like the sugar in Twizzlers, but there must be something about it, how it loads glycemically in your body.
it's a fast digesting source, I guess. And I think
Hmm.
relative to something like chocolate, maybe can be a little bit easier on the GI system. Maybe you burp a little bit less. Like, I know with Reese's specifically, Reese's give me heartburn if I'm like running and I'm eating Reese's. So I've had some bad
Hmm.
days on the trail with those. But no, the Twizzlers are okay.
I'll have to try that next. I don't know. I don't like, I'm the opposite kind of athlete of you. I'm a sprint short endurance person, but every so often someone convinces me to do an ultra endurance race. I did the Navy SEAL Maritime Murph across the Hudson this summer. So that was tough training for because I had to swim a 5K, which is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. Somebody asked, "What's the most boring thing you've ever done?" It was like swim a 5K. I was so bored.
How long did it take? It takes like an hour or something, or I guess if you're like
Over
much,
an hour.
yeah.
I finished. I mean, so it's like one of those things you had to demonstrate that you could. And So I was averaging like 34, 35 minutes for the first 2 miles. And then like once I completed the first 2 miles, I got like my mind went and I was like, okay, I can finish this. So I just took my good old time and like would stop every 200 meters and like hang on my buoy and then like restart. My final time ended up being an 2 hour. Wait, was it 2 hours? No, it wasn't that much. I think it was, yeah, maybe it was. It was like 2 hours and 12 minutes or something, but whatever.
No, that sounds great. I don't know what the event is. I'll have to look it up and everything, but I can feel you there with the swimming. I've never done an Ironman, but I was training for one for a while early on in grad school, and I was swimming upwards of 2 miles a day, and then it was just god awful boring. Just looking at like the black lane in the pool, and I was like, yeah, this sucks. Maybe I could just run or like
Not
bike
any
or
better in
something.
a lake. Not any better. Well, so the actual Navy SEAL swim is really cool. It's like you run from Jersey City to this entry point into the water. So it's like a 1.7 mile run. And along the way you do like 25 honor push-ups, right? Because we or the 22 honor push-ups, because we always do that for the fallen. And then you swim a mile to Ellis Island, right? No, or is it no? You swim to the Statue of Liberty, and then you climb up on a barge and you do 100 push-ups and 22 pull-ups, and then you jump off the barge, swim to the next barge, which is at Ellis Island, do the same, and then you do a mile and a half swim across the Hudson. So the first two swims are a mile. The third one is a mile and a half across the Hudson, and then you get out of the water and you do 100 more pull-ups, 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups, and then another mile and a half of running. So it ends up being like a 5K run mixed with a 3.5 mile swim in the Hudson, which is like unforgiving water, and pretty much the equivalent of doing Murph minus the squats.
That's insane. It sounds like
Yeah,
it sounds
we're all crazy. We're all
Yeah,
crazy.
it sounds like a great workout, but yeah, it's like it takes a certain mindset. But that's amazing. And listen, I know you got to go soon. If there's like one thing that you could give, like, and I know you've talked about this a whole lot, and we've written books about it, but as far as like sleep optimization that people could begin to do tonight, like, what's one thing they could do, like maybe 1 hour out that could help them kind of drift off into sleep?
I mean, if I had to give people one thing, um, right, it all starts with relaxation, but I would say like have like a 20-minute wind down routine before bed. Oftentimes it begins with just taking a hot shower and like, dimming all the lights in your house. And right, even just like lighting a candle and taking a shower under candlelight. I know that seems like really woo woo and cheesy, but like just operating in low light and trying to relax as much as possible, right? Facilitated through changing your core body temperature through a hot shower, and the cool down response after can make all the difference in the world.
Probably wouldn't hurt to put on some like Enya or something like nice relaxation.
Oh God, I've been listening to Enya since I had a Latin teacher in high school who I don't know. She wasn't being facetious. She was a nun in her previous life. I think she just liked Enya. And I didn't go to a Catholic school. I went to a crappy public high school. But yeah, we always listened to Enya when we would take tests and stuff. It was kind of annoying. But
Cool, cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing some of your wisdom and everything. And I'm excited to see what you've got next in the pipeline.
yeah, we'll see. I'm here for a little bit. Hopefully, I'll be back in the NASA pipeline next time, but we'll see.
If you can get selected for NASA space training, I have 20 more questions I would love to ask you all about space and orthostasis and the circadian rhythm. So I'll be excited to hear about that.
Yeah. I mean, I would be learning it in real time too, because that's part of it. They learn all those different subject areas that people spend their lifetime studying.
Oh, awesome. Well, where can people find you?
So I do have a book, right? The Meathead Unraveling the Athletic Brain. Um, More or less goes into the benefits of exercise on brain health. You can find that on Amazon. And then my Instagram is Doc Jock, ZZZ, DOCJOCKZZZ.
Awesome. Well, I'll have that linked on down below. So,
Okay.
Dr. Allison, thank you so much for coming on today. It was really wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
All righty.